Hi everyone, I'm Shubhi Khanna, a Python developer by choice. And I started off with Python about 9 or 10 months back. And the reason for today's presentation, that is static typing, is solely and solely because of this huge fight that I had with a friend. So when I received a piece of code from her, I couldn't understand a lot of bits. And we ended up arguing about why a certain variable was put in a certain place and why was it not used as it should have. And while trying to resolve that fight, I ended up studying all about static typing. So yeah, let's start with it. Now, before we really dive deep into Python, I have a short series of questions for you. So yeah, let's start with this. Can you identify which language is this? Now, since this is not a live session, I assume most of you know, but this is C++, as is evident. Moving on to another snippet. So this, as you can see, is Java. The public static int kind of gives it away. Next up, we have this. Now, U8, this should be an identifier for most of you. This is Rust. And then we have TypeScript. So the reason I wanted to show you all these languages is because you have to notice where and when are we specifically telling the type. Now, just to summarize it all, if I had to break these languages into two barriers of dynamic and static, there would be Ruby, Clojure, and JavaScript and dynamic, and Java, Rust, C++, and TypeScript and static. So those of you who know one, both, or all of these languages have a fair idea of what I am going to talk about. Now, let's dive into the language of the day, Python. So what really is Python? Because when we study about it, the first thing that we learn about Python is that it's a dynamically typed language. So that is true. I'm not saying it isn't, but the thing about Python is that it is dynamically typed, but it can optionally be statically typed. And by the end of this conference, I hope most of you feel the need to use this feature. All right, so let's dive into the first bit of code. Now, this is a relatively easy one. You simply have a lot of types. When you say type 30, that's int, type 32.3 is float, then there's hey, that's a string, and then there's hey there, that's a list. Now, this is pretty evident. So even if this piece of code goes to some other developer, they know what you're talking about. Moving on. A is 30, 30, we're cool. Then there's float, 30, we're cool with that. The string works for us as well. But come on to the fourth segment of code. There's list, string, float, 30. Now, what I ideally wanted to do over here was add the value 30, that was a float and then convert it to a string, to a list as one element. However, Python did not understand that. And this is where the first type error came in. Now, another thing that is of a lot of use to us is the fact that when you talk about types, so it could be int, float, string, these are merely classes. And when we use the type function, what we are really doing is that we are seeing whether or not that value, or that variable that we're talking about, belongs to that class. So when we talk about dynamic typing, in layman's terms, it simply means that variables can be of any type and the arguments and return values of functions can be of any type. That's like the basic thing. Now, just as an example, over here I've imported random and then I've taken a variable n wherein I've written random.choice and it could choose between all three values. When I type in type n, what do you think will be the answer? Now, here we don't have a specified answer because it could be all three, a string, an integer, or a float. And it really doesn't matter to us at this stage because what you're seeing on the screen is a 3-line code. Moving on, I defined a function over here that's ABC, return ABC. Just by reading the first 2 lines, you have no idea about what type is it that I'm talking about or what is the return type for that matter. But now let's start using it. So if I take 3 integers, it's pretty evident. I get an integer as a return value. If I use 2 strings, I get a list back, and that's all cool. But look at this piece of code. I've used the same function, the definition's exactly the same, but what I've done over here is that I have tried to concatenate the value of a string with integer. So this is a really common error that most of us have seen. And this is where a type error comes up. So, I think now you get the gist of what I'm trying to say when I say that it can work for small codes, but as and when the code gets bigger and bigger, you have to use static typing. So just a simple question, how do I fix it? Now, the first method is pretty redundant. That is to write doc strings. I totally empathize with each and everyone out there who's ever had to write doc strings. I had to do this when I was learning the language. My university required me to do so. And while it was okay till my code was, say, 200 to 500 lines long, after that, it got really tedious. So what's the second way? Assert. Now, I am pretty sure the developers of Python didn't have this particular man in mind when they made the function assert, but that's just how I look at functions. So yeah, let's see how to use assert. So this is basically how you use assert. Now, I defined a function that had 3 parameters, A, B, and C. And then I asserted that the type of A, B, and C was an integer. Now, you're free to do this for all kind of codes you want, and for that matter, for big and small codes alike. But the problem is that this adds the number of lines to your code. And as developers, we always learn to have the least amount of time complexity, the least amount of space complexity, and the minimum lines of code required. So this again is not really a solution. Now, coming to our topic for the talk today, duck typing or static typing. So static typing, or the whole concept of it, comes from a single sentence in English, which says that if it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, then it probably is a duck. All right, we're going to see how we apply this to the world of programming. Now, before we dive into what it exactly is and stuff, there's a rather interesting story that you would love to know about static typing. The history of it is the reason why most programmers today lead a rather easy life, and this is why your code has become all the more optimized. So Dropbox. Now, Dropbox journey has been really, really interesting. Dropbox is a big user of Python, and I'm sure some of our audience or a lot of members would have in the past worked with Dropbox as a developer or have definitely used its services. So yeah, for Dropbox, its most widely used language, both for backend services and the desktop client app, was Python. So there were millions of lines of code, and this made it really hard for them to understand and seriously impacted their productivity. To mitigate this, they had been gradually mitigating their code to static typing using MyPy. Now, a lot of you know what MyPy is, but we're also going to explore a different aspect of it right now. So Dropbox had been one of the first companies to adopt static typing. And these days, thousands of projects, they use MyPy, and things are quite, tested to that extent. But it had been a long journey for them to get to that point. So the first question that arose was, why type checking? Or simply put, why duck typing? If you have ever used dynamically typed Python, you might wonder about all the fuss about static typing in MyPy, which is why a lot of friends questioned me about this entire speech itself. A lot of people, they enjoy Python because it has dynamic typing as a major feature. So the key to static typing checking is scale. And I know this is the third time that I'm iterating this, but The larger your project, the more you want and quite frankly need it. So once your project is tens of thousands of lines of code and you have a whole lot of engineers working on it, your experience is gradually going to tell you that understanding code becomes the key to maintaining developer productivity. So without type annotations, basic reasoning such as figuring out valid arguments to a function or the possible return types becomes a hard problem. So, a lot of questions that we as developers often get is, can this function return none? What is this supposed argument mean to us? Where do we use it? What is the type of so-and-so attribute? Is it integer, string, or is it perhaps a custom type? Or maybe a question that I get very often is that, does this argument need to be a list? Or can I give a tuple or a set? So there are a lot of such questions that often come up. Now, in a perfect world, you could expect these to be documented in a docstring, but experience overwhelmingly says that this is often not the case. And even if there is documentation, you can't rely on it being accurate. A lot of times, those who are writing the main code are not the ones documenting it. So there's a whole bridge that comes over there. Now, even if there is a docstring, it's often ambiguous or imprecise. That leaves a lot of room for misunderstandings. Now, this particular problem becomes large for teams and code bases. Although Python is really good at early and middle stages of a project, at a certain point, successful projects and companies that use Python may face a critical decision. Should we rewrite everything in a statically typed language? Now, a type checker like MyPy solves this problem by providing a formal language for describing types and by validating that the provided types match the implementation and optionally that they exist. In a sense, it provides verified documentation, simply put. All right. Now, while Dropbox plays an essential role, there are also a lot of other milestones that helped us get to where we are today. So we first started with PEP. PEP stands for Python Enhancement Proposal. And the 3107 was the one that stated about function annotations. So what I mean by that is that you could start adding a lot of metadata to functions. For example, look at the very function on the screen. There's def function, ABC is before, but over here, I've assigned some values to it. And there's also return type. So whenever, if I'm a developer who's receiving the code, all I need to do is type in the function name dot annotations, and I get whatever the previous developer was trying to say or trying to do with the code. In fact, this gave room to a lot of other things. So once PEP 3107 was released, the entire team was discussing whether it could be used for type checking, for IDs, for function overloading, foreign language bridges, which was a major problem then. Also adaptation, predict, logic functions, database query mapping, RPC parameter marshalling. And there were other things that were related to documentation that could see a better future. All right. Now we've back to the very function that we started with, but over here I've used function annotations. So it's really clear to me that A, B, and C are all integer types, and the return value is also an integer type. Now let's come to a man who significantly helped us get where we are today, and that's Yuka Letasalo. Now, he was writing his thesis, and its aim was the unification of statically typed and dynamically typed languages. So there were a couple of things that he had in mind, which included that he wanted the code to be able to go and to be able to code everything from tiny scripts to multi-million line code bases. There was another condition that he had, that there should be gradual growth from an untyped prototype to a statically typed prototype or a product. So I mean, as developers, it's very difficult to work with something that has totally been revamped. And this was not what he had in mind. So he not only wanted gradual growth, but he also wanted something productive coming out of it. In fact, in his words, adding a static type system to a dynamically typed language can be an invasive change, which is obvious because you are not only changing semantics or code, you're trying to change the entire architecture of it. So that was what he said. And he added on to say that optional pluggable type systems do not affect runtime semantics of programs, and thus they can be added to a language without affecting existing code and tools. So we are kind of getting to what MyPy is today. And there we are. But right now, what you're reading is not what MyPy stands for us today. So the story goes like this. He couldn't do his research on Python. So he created another language, which was quite similar to Python, but he tried to implement static typing in it. Now he called this particular language MyPy. But the problem was that to induct a new language altogether was troublesome. And it was better to simply use an extension or something that could help revamp the current code. So that's what he said when he wrote that MyPy is an experimental variation of Python that supports writing programs that seamlessly mix dynamic and static typing. Now, when he went to PyCon 2013, that's when he was convinced to drop his MyPy of that time and induct that into the current Python code. Another thing that played a crucial role was PEP 483. Now, this was when the theory of type hints came into being. So while we still did not have a formal product to hit it off with, we had a certain structure in mind. And some of its features that were being discussed at that time were optional typing. So what they basically wanted to do was make this a very seamless experience and for developers to not get overwhelmed at any stage at all. So we started off with optional typing so that it only gets in your way if you really wanted to. Otherwise, you're cool. You can work with dynamic typing. It's not going to affect your code at all. Then there was gradual typing. I've already talked about it. Not to do it all at once, but to do it in bits and pieces, because it gets simpler for you to do and for another person to read. Then there was variable annotations. Now, up until now, when I discussed PEPs with you, we only had function annotations. And this is not really enough when we are working with code bases. So that's when he introduced a team of engineers introduced variable annotations. Another thing was that most of the things they were discussing at that point of time were compatible with the newer versions of Python. But it was kind of unfair to those who were still using Python 2 and other versions. So they had to build a product that was as compatible with Python 2 as was with its other latest versions. And then there were special type constructs. They ended up being the fundamental building blocks for static typing. You know how we have our existing types like int, float, string, etc. And then there's also none type. So they tried making some new types. Now, when I talk about new types, let's take an example as union. So what union could do was probably a union of integer and float, and that would help enhance the code a million times. Another thing was that they launched container types. Container types, generic types, and relationships. Now, container types were made for defining the types inside container classes. Because obviously, as I just told you, there were just function annotations initially, and then we kept building onto other things. And containers couldn't be left out because they form a crucial component of the entire code. Then there came generic types. Now, as you all know that when a class or a function behaves in a generic manner, the generic types such as iterable. Moving on to relationships. Now, note how I initially told you that when we talk about types or int and float, these are basically classes. And what we are checking is whether or not that object belongs to a particular class. But when I'm talking about modified data types like union, these are types and not classes. So it was very, very important to not only have these exist, but to also define proper relationships between them. Then we moved on to PEP 484. Now this came with Python version 3.5 that was launched on 13 September 2015. What this did was that concept of type hints was now coming into being. So they had a formal documentation ready and they started implementing it at this stage. And then later on came PEP 526. Now what this did was it provided a syntax for variable annotations. So if you notice the first snippet of code, you have to see the type has been defined as a comment. But in the second piece of code, there was an inbuilt syntax that could have been used to do the same. So this was the difference that really came onto PEP 526. Discussing our beloved MyPy. Now, while I've told you a certain degree of how MyPy came into being, there were, going back to Dropbox, there were a lot of benefits about static typing that they wanted to delve into, and they weren't trivial at all. So starting off with the fact that a type checker was finding a lot of subtle and not so subtle bugs. So a typical example is forgetting to handle a none value or some other special condition, which is something that we as developers skip out quite a bit. The second was refactoring. Now, refactoring becomes much easier as the type checker will often tell you exactly what code needs to be changed. So they didn't hope for 100% test coverage, which is usually impractical. They did not need to study deep stack traces to understand what went wrong. Another thing was that even in a large project, MyPy can often perform a full-time check in a fraction of seconds. So running tests often takes tens of seconds or minutes. Now, type checking provides quick feedback. It takes less time and it allows us to iterate faster. We don't need to write fragile, hard to maintain unit tests that mock and patch the world to get quick feedback. Another thing was IDEs. Now, IDEs in editors such as PyCharm or Visual Studio, they take advantage of type annotations to provide code completion, to highlight errors, and to support better go-to-definition functionality. These are just some of the helpful feature types enabled. Now, for some programmers, this is the biggest and quickest win. This use case doesn't require a separate type checker tool such as MyPy, though MyPy helps with the annotations in sync with the code. Going on to the next point, you know how type checkers have been widely discussed till now, but type checkers can be both static versus dynamic. Now, when I talk about static type checkers, they are going to check the code when it's still, as the name suggests. Dynamic ones are going to check them at runtime. So yeah, it's all in front of you. Performed at compile time, early detection, no runtime overhead. When it comes to dynamic type checking, it's performed at runtime. It is definitely more flexible and there's rapid prototyping. This was one of the key features that stood out. And there's obviously overhead to check runtime tags. Now, a question that comes back to me very often is that, but why do I have to use static typing? What's in it for me? When do I use it? When do I not use it? And most importantly, how do I use it? So I just made a couple of points over here. So when should you not use static typing? Now, As tempted as we are to sometimes use static typing instead of unit tests, that's not how it works. And I get the confusion because a lot of times our unit tests do nothing but check the types. But in a lot of other cases, especially when you're working with gruesome code bases, you will have to use both of them. So please don't let go of one just because the other seems easy. Where should you use static typing? Definitely when you're writing millions of lines of code. You definitely need it at this stage. In fact, let's get back to the person we've been admiring the most throughout this talk. He himself said that at our scale, millions of lines of Python, the dynamic typing in Python made code needlessly hard to understand and started to seriously impact productivity. In fact, this was the very sentence which kickstarted the entire Dropbox journey. Yeah. So when should you use static typing? Another case is when your code is confusing. Now, I'm not particularly saying that you're not being a good developer or something, but I get it. Sometimes code bases can be confusing even when you're trying to simplify them. So that's all right. You don't need to worry about it. Simply use static typing and your work's done. Another thing is when your code is for the public. A lot of times when we work on GitHub or other platforms, what you notice is that the code's there, the code's perfect, it's giving you the desired results. But if you wish to add something to it, you have to spend days and days researching and reading that code. And for me, the worst thing is when I have to read a line and then read the entire code again and again just to understand where is it being placed and what's really going on. So yeah, that's another area where you could consider using it. Before migrating, yeah, I think I mentioned this before as well, but when you're migrating your code or the entire code base from maybe a different server to a different set of people, etc., it's crucial to use static typing for two reasons. A, it's going to simplify their task, but B, you are not going to get pestering calls and emails all the time as to what is really happening in this entire code. Yeah. So yeah, you could just start off with wanting to experiment with static typing. I mean, that's how I started off with it. And there was a really interesting tweet that I read about static typing that said, static typing is like this warm comforter that you don't want to let go of once you have it around you. And I couldn't agree more. So yeah. Now, if I had to give you 5 easy steps to get started, it would be to migrate to a Python version that is, I wouldn't say the very latest one, but something that's 3.6 or 3.6 above. Now, I'm not trying to demotivate anyone who's using an older version, but it's just that I, as a developer, have found it easier to work with these new versions since there's a lot of support all around you. As these versions keep getting older, there's a whole lot of ruckus that's created and you don't have a lot of people to go to. Then install a type checker locally. You can definitely do this. That's not a big deal. Start optionally typing your code base. So even if your code is say 50 or 100 lines long, try inducting bits and pieces of static typing in it. Run a type checker with your linting and yeah, finally convince other developers to join in. Now, I'm not saying that static typing has been all good and there have been no obstacles at all. There have been obstacles, and if I have to talk about some obstacles that the team at Dropbox faced. So the first obstacle that they came across was missing files. So what happened was that they started with only a small number of files in the MyPy build, and everything outside the build was not checked. So files were implicitly added to the build when the first annotations were added. Now, if you imported anything from a module outside the build, you'd get values with the any type, which are not checked at all. So this resulted in a major loss of typing precision, especially early in migration. And, you know, this still worked surprisingly well, though it was a typical experience that adding a file to the build exposed issues in other parts of the code base. Now, in the worst case, two isolated islands of type check code were being merged, and it turned out that the types weren't compatible between the two islands, necessitating numerous changes to annotations in retrospect. Now, they should have added basic library modules to the MyPy build much earlier to make things smoother, but yeah, that was a lesson learned. Another thing was annotating legacy code. Now, I get it. The reason why I'm trying to tell you to start now is that once your code gets old or long, it gets very, very difficult to start annotating. So when they started, they had over 4 million lines of existing Python code. And it was clear that annotating all of that would be non-trivial. So they implemented a tool called PyAnnotate that could collect types of runtime when running tests and insert type annotations based on these types. But it didn't see much adoption. Collecting the types was slow, and generated types often required a lot of manual polish. So they thought about running it automatically on every test build and or collecting types from a small fraction of live networking requests, but they decided against it as the approach was rather risky. Now, another thing was importing cycles. Importing cycles made it hard to make MyPy faster. I'm sorry. Now, they also had to work hard to make MyPy support all kinds of idioms arising from import cycles. And then when they finished a major redesign project that finally fixed most important cycle issues, that was when the issues were actually, they learned that the issues were turning from the very early days of Allure, the research language that MyPy was originally targeted in. Now, Allure had syntax that made dealing with import cycles easy, and they inherited some limitations from the simple-minded implementation. So the reason I've also told you the drawbacks or the problems that they faced along the way was because these are things that you will often incorporate in your code as well, especially if you are shifting to static typing now. So yeah, just to summarize it all, it's something that has helped me and a lot of other developers all over the world. You can definitely adopt it. There are pros and cons to it, I agree, but there's nothing that cannot be worked around. So yeah, that was my time, and I'm open to any questions from you all. Let's all get in touch over here, and yeah, we can take this ahead. Thank you so much for being an amazing audience.